thank you very much to Pure Sativa, our sponsors, who have contributed towards us being able to come over here this time. And so I need to give them a plug. And for all your seed, for all your paraphernalia, anything cannabis related, go to puresativa.com. Thank you very much.
Amsterdam.
Hello, good evening and welcome. And here we are in Descartes Coffee Shop with Sam the Skunkman. Now,
howdy.
Okay, Sam, welcome to Descartes Coffee Shop. Now, Sam is responsible for bringing many cannabis genetics to the fore, particularly in Europe over the last 40 years nearly. And originally he was breeding in the United States and decided to come over to Europe and bring his skunk variety, and also he brought haze. In fact, Sam was the first guy that ever had a cannabis seed company, which he founded Sacred Seeds back in 1975. So let's have a look at what questions we have for Sam. And let's start off. What made you dedicate your life to cannabis, Sam? Was it an event, a great smoke, a health problem, or did you just like getting high?
I would say it's more like that I was liking getting high. Mm-hmm. That, and I was traveling around the world, and I was going to many different places. I had been fed the myth that it was the grower or where he grew it that decided what the quality of the plant was.
Right.
Whereas I quickly found when I traveled around the world that the genetics is what really makes the biggest difference. As long as it's grown well and allowed to fully mature, it's the genetics that determine whether you have a truly great plant or just an average or even below average plant.
Yeah, for sure. Of all the work you've ever done in cannabis, what are you most proud of? What would you say? Would it be the haze or the skunk? Or
well, the haze was not developed by me. I merely preserved it and conserved it so that other people would be able to use it.
Right.
I never really focused on haze in a breeding project except for to conserve as many of the genes as possible, which I tried to do that.
Yeah.
But my more well-known things that I've been bred for is like skunk number 1, which was a 3-way hybrid between an Afghan times a Colombian, and then that F1 bred times a Acapulco of Mexico.
Okay.
And that created a 3-way hybrid, which had really, really nice flower to leaf ratio, and had terpenes that were loud as hell. Uh-huh. And at the first few generations, they smelled exactly like a skunk had been run over by your car.
Yeah, because we have a bit of contention, don't we, with this kind of roadkill skunk that are purported to be over in the United States, and your skunk. And then some people say that they vary tremendously.
Well, first of all, every seed I grew the first few generations was roadkill skunk.
Right.
They were all roadkill skunk. But I bred it away from that because what I found was the sweeter ones and the ones that didn't have such a skunky smell with thiols, they were, in fact, I preferred the high.
And the smell.
And the smell. Because one of the problems with the roadkill, because of the thiol production, is that it could be smelled. I mean, when I used to drive up to my greenhouse in Amsterdam, I could smell it a quarter of a mile away downwind.
Jeez.
I mean, it's really, really, and that's a semi-sweetened version of it. I mean, the original one was
sour, isn't it?
It wasn't sour as much as it was thiols, and that's exactly what skunks have in them.
Yeah.
And you could smell it really far away. I don't think they have skunks in England, do they?
No, we don't have some. We have badgers.
Badgers.
They don't smell quite as bad. Same coloration though.
I'm actually doing some work right now where I'm trying to see, similar to the terpene work that we did years ago, me and Robert Clark, where what we did was we took pure THC and then tried to, we smoked 25 milligrams of pure THC vaporized in a volcano. And then we, on top of that, smoked 25 milligrams of THC spiked with just one terpene. So whether it be limonene or myrcene or pinene. And from that, we were able to determine over a several week period of work which terpenes potentiated cannabis, which terpenes modulated THC.
Right.
And I'm going to do the same work with thiols so that we can understand, do thiols modulate or contribute to the potency of THC? I don't know.
No, interesting subject.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be nice to
Because
find out.
thiols are not a terpene.
No.
They're sulfur-containing compounds.
Okay. Yeah, this is getting very scientific for me, but I'll try and follow along, Sam. You're such a good geneticist.
If it works out, either way, I'm interested in the results.
Yeah. Yes, but the plant offers so much, and I think relatively little has been discovered the potential of cannabis, even at this stage. Because for many years it's not been legal to be able to explore the potentials of cannabis under a lot of different.
Well, it's all changed now. The world has changed.
Yeah.
And now they're not only trying to find benefits from medical, but they're also trying to find benefits from recreational and ways to make it cleaner, safer, more potent.
Yeah.
Because actually, the more potent it is, the less you need to smoke to achieve the same.
Exactly.
Has he been drinking?
I don't know. Maybe he's been on the scotch and he's been drinking something very potent.
So, in theory, less consumption of a smaller amount that's higher potency is theoretically safer.
Yeah, because you don't have to consume such volume.
Yeah, and it's actually the combusted plant material that's the most negative for the smoking cannabis.
For lung health.
Yeah.
I'll read this to you. This is from one of our members. I'm not going to mention the member's name because maybe they don't like that. It says, Sam, other than cold weather, cheap brasses and Argentinian steakhouses, what has kept you in Amsterdam so long? Is it the static filtered hash making technique that has been adopted recently by some in Morocco, the same as the technique he was working on since 2006 or so? You mentioned in the main Hayes thread that you're considering writing a book about the history of Hayes, or maybe his own story. Is this started yet? You've got a couple of questions. Which one do you want to ask?
Well, maybe ask me the questions one at a time, because
Okay. You mentioned in the main Hayes thread, this is on IC Mag, that you're considering writing a book about the history of Hayes.
No, I'm not. I don't want to write a book.
Okay, so he's not writing a book. Do you still keep old pure landrace seeds?
Yes, I have a few. I have some old landrace seeds from various places in the world.
Mhm.
I also have things like original haze.
Uh-huh.
I forget how much I've got, maybe a kilo of them or something. So
Do you have South American Pure Landrace varieties?
I have a few, yes.
Uh-huh. Good, that's what they wanted to know. What's the best way to preserve landraces? Is there any non-commercial institutions doing that in some form that you know of?
Not really. I mean, to preserve a landrace properly, if you don't want to lose genes from the gene pool that you're trying to conserve, you need to grow a very minimum of 1,000 males and 1,000 females.
Yeah.
And not from clones, you have to do this from seeds, so that it's got every little different combination in it. And then you freely pollinate that 1,000 times 1,000,
Mm-hmm.
and that drops your gene loss down to, less than 1%. I mean, so if you want to preserve it, and there's little or nobody doing it this way properly. I mean, they do it in third world countries, like in Colombia, somebody could have a field of 10,000 Colombian plants.
Right.
But most of the smarter people now are not pollinating them. So it's you really need 1,000 males freely pollinating 1,000 females. That way, every different genetic combination is preserved.
Right. Okay. It would be great to hear you break down the logic behind the breeding of skunk number one. Where did the Afghani come from? What did it bring to the game?
The Afghani was a friend of mine's, to be honest. The Colombian was mine. The Mexican was also mine. And I don't have either the Colombian or the Mexican anymore. I did not bring any plants living from America. I only brought seeds, because it was legal to bring seeds here. But not necessarily leave America with them, but
Yeah, you had to get them out first. Yeah.
but once they were here, they were legal.
Yeah. So did you ever get stopped on the way in and then find
No.
seeds on you and
Absolutely.
let you go?
It's a good thing, because I had 5 kilograms, which is a lot of seeds.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like,
300,000.
To at least 250.
Yeah.
Because it was haze seeds, like you say, maybe closer to 300. But that was maybe a quarter or half of the suitcase. I forget. The rest of it was, I had a few clothes to wear.
Back to the skunk. At what point was the Mexican crossed to the Colombian and Afghani?
Well, it was an F1 between Colombian. The Afghan was a female, the Colombian was a male. But it was a bit late maturing, so I tried to make it a little bit earlier with the Mexican. That's really why I did it. Also, I preferred the more sativa-ish plants rather than what indica or wide leaf. That's what indica really is, wide leaf. Mm-hmm. And the narrow leaf plants, the sativas.
More tropical plants.
And they have better tasting terpenes. The indicas, the Afghan, they can have just as much THC, but they're usually not as pleasant to smoke as herbal
The
cannabis.
taste, the bouquet.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
different, yeah. How long did it take you to actually stabilize skunk?
Well, it was made over a 3-year period is when I saw that it was stable. Mm-hmm. And then I bred it to itself for maybe another 7-8 years in California, and then brought it to the Netherlands, and I grew 20,000 of them and selected out the best male and the best females, 10 of the best males, 10 of the best females, and then combined those individually. So the next year, after I grew the 20,000, I grew another 20,000, and they were the 10 best boys, 10 best girls. So that was a population of 100 different F1s.
Yes.
And what I grew 200 of each of those, so another 20,000 plants.
Wow.
And from that, I was able to determine which of those 10 females and which of those 10 males produced the most consistent, the highest potency, the best leaf to flower. Mm-hmm. And I had one plant that was a real winner, and that's the one that I use most of the time.
Did you look for yield as well?
Oh, absolutely.
Produce the best yield.
Absolutely.
And that kind of revolutionized the growing industry in a way, because it meant people could easily take a plant indoors and grow it within.
You could grow it under lights, or you could grow it in a greenhouse really easy. Yeah. Now, skunk was, and in a place like France or Spain, you could also grow it outdoors.
Yeah.
Very, very easy.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Because the flowering time was much shorter than the landrace varieties that it was probably bred from.
Correct.
So that meant that people who are in the industry of growing cannabis could grow more crops per year because the flowering time was less.
They took that, unfortunately, to its logical end, whereas they really wanted things that finished in 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And the quality wasn't there.
No.
But the turnover, all they were interested in was
the money.
Quantity, not quality.
Yeah.
And my mantra over and over and over is quality over quantity.
Quality over quantity.
But there's no reason why you can't try it for both.
Mm. What do you consider to be the oldest seeds that you currently have in your collection?
Well, I've got some which are 2,700 years old.
Wow. Where are they from?
They're from the it's from the mountains where they
found Noah's Ark.
Well, no, not Noah's Ark, but they were from the Tin Shan Mountains in China, but not in China, closer towards I can't remember the name of the words. Petsri. They had burial mounds there, and they dug them up, and they found seeds from them. And we were doing some work with the Vavilov Institute in St. Petersburg, Russia, and they took me to the museum, and they were kind enough to give me some of those.
They found them also in the tombs of the pharaohs, didn't they?
I'm not sure. I've never seen any from the tombs of the pharaohs, but
I thought I heard that. Maybe it was watching the.
I know they collected them from Redding ponds in the UK more than 1,000 years ago. Mm-hmm. So, you know what a Redding pond is? That's where you soak hemp.
Okay. Retting. Yeah.
Retting. Yeah. Redding pond.
Retting.
And the seeds all fall to the bottom of the lake, and they found layers like this at the bottoms of the lake. So I've got some of those. I've got some that are like 800 years old, 1,000 years old, 1,500 years old, 2,000. But I don't grow them because the weed is too old and it's too sleepy, and no, I'm joking. It doesn't germinate after 2,000 years, especially if it's been in a Redding pond.
Is there any variety that you've tried that you like more than Original Haze, or one that is even close to it, your personal choice? Or is Haze, it's always Haze and that's the best and there's nothing that comes close?
Well, let me think. I've smoked cannabis that first of all, I don't smoke very much cannabis, I'm much more of a resin smoker. Yeah. But I love skunk #1 from a really good select plant that has been cleaned up. So the dry sift is 99.9% resin heads. I mean, I really, really like it. There's something about it that just turns my crank. But Haze absolutely is my favorite. It's so complex. And the thing about Haze too is, and it's got to a lesser degree this, it has no ceiling. In other words, with Haze, no matter how much you smoke, if you're smoking a good plant, one puff more, you get higher. Mm-hmm. And that, I think, is really difficult to find.
Someone says, are you holding any strains that you haven't released to the public?
I'm retired.
And can I use one as a donor in my reading project?
What is a donor?
I don't know, that's it came from.
Okay, I don't understand.
Did you see any changes in a clone you were keeping for a long period of time?
Not if you keep it away from insect problems. In other words, insects will have viruses or other things that they can pass on. But if you keep your clone clear and clean, and make sure you only use vigorous parts of your mother. Now, I've had them for 30 years and they're exactly the same. I couldn't measure any difference in yield or resistance or vigor or anything.
What about what you would feed your plants generally? Did you?
I was an organic grower. So I used organic NPK corals. So that's corals made with, seaweed, chicken shit, or some animal shit. And so the NPK was coming from organic sources.
The NPK ratios, what would you look for cannabis?
I can't remember off the top of my head. I'd have to look it up. But what we would do is we would spread these corals over at a measured weight of, I think it was 20 or 50 kilos per 1,000 square meters or 500, I forget. And then I would have a professional rototill machine, a tractor, come in and rototill the ground in between.
Right.
And so
get it mixed up that way.
Yeah, and so every year the soil got a little bit better. I also had added worm castings, just all kinds of really good things to my soil.
Yeah.
I
guano, did you ever use guano?
I used it, but it's a bit expensive to use it by itself. But sometimes for special plants, I would also add extra guano at the end. Liquid guano.
Yeah.
The haze plants, do they need special feeding or special care regime?
I don't. I just plant them in the ground with the rest of them. To be honest.
Okay, like normal plants.
Yeah, just.
Okay. Because
what I find is that widely indica plants are often trouble because they're very susceptible to mildew.
Yeah, mold and mildew.
Mildew. And recently, I think about 6, 7, 8 months ago, they found a set of genes in cannabis. So there are ones that have susceptibility genes, so they can easily get mildew. And there are ones that have resistant genes. Yeah. And the hazes have the resistant genes, and the wide leaf ones have the susceptibility genes. Yeah. And they said it's even more important to get rid of the susceptibility genes than to have the resistance genes. But that's according to them.
I always thought
the paper's on my bibliography, and I see
indicas and mold. If you look where indicas grow well, like in the Hindu Kush, places like that, it's hot and dry. It's not humid.
So they didn't need natural resistance.
Yeah, and if you look at the bud construction, let's say equatorial sativa, and then you look at an indica, it's a lot more closer, the bud is a lot more packed closer together, and so it's more susceptible to molding, whereas the sativa is more spread out. Yeah. The flowers are more spread out.
But what's really important is the resistance. Because if they have resistance, even if they're chunky, they don't get it.
They don't get it. They just don't get powdery mildew.
If they don't have susceptibility genes in their package.
So where can you get this this gene or whatever that will stop them getting mildew? And is anybody working with that? If
you look in the bibliography, it's got both papers in there. I think it's under DNA. So in the bibliography. Right. And they don't tell you which varieties or what. But what you can do is you can have a private company check it for those genes and make sure that because what you'd want to do is, for example, let's say you have an indica or wide leaf and a narrow leaf.
Mhm.
So this has got the resistance, this has the susceptibility. You cross them and you get all these F2 seeds. If you grow enough of them, you're going to find one that's got the resistance, but not the susceptibility gene.
Yeah.
But it'll look basically all the same. It just doesn't have those genes.
You have to grow it out in a very humid environment to find out if it does.
No, you'd have to DNA test it.
Well, DNA test.
And if the DNA tests it that it does not have the susceptibility, then you can try to confirm it by doing what you just
Right. Okay, I've got it the wrong way around. Whoops.
said. But it's the same difference.
Yeah. That's interesting because that would mean that you could grow some of these Hindu Kush indicas in a tropical equatorial environment where it's very humid and they wouldn't mold.
Yes, as long as they don't have the susceptibility.
Yeah, I've been taking seeds around the world for many years, and usually if I take seeds off somebody in Southeast Asia, let's say, I usually exchange them for something else, and they always want these indica varieties, and then when they try to grow them over there, they mold.
Same thing happens in Jamaica.
Yeah.
In Jamaica, because the photo period is so short, they're only like less than 3 feet tall, less than a meter tall.
I've seen
And
it.
they're flowered off, finished, and molding.
Yeah.
Sam, when you have your greenhouse, like for your personal use, what plants would you grow for your personal use?
Or I grow skunk for resin production for dry sift. I would grow haze for, I have trouble dry sifting haze, so what I might do from it is manicure it really, really good and then make rosin out of it. Because really high potent rosin, whether you make it out of weed or it might be a little bit better if you make it out of water hash or dry sift. It's really easy to do from bone also.
Right, there's another question from one of the ICMAC members. When you're growing out seeds, what markers, cues, or morphology characteristics are you looking for that gets you excited?
Well, normally I don't. As long as the plant is healthy and vigorous, I don't look at them too much until they start to flower.
Mm-hmm.
To be honest, I mean, a few times I will pick out plants that have things like world philosophy or what's it called? I forget the other word, but what that means is instead of having 2 branches, it has 4 branches.
Uh-huh.
But that's just for amusement. There's nothing that makes that intrinsically better.
Okay. Do you see any changes at all in any clone lines over the years?
No, I really don't. I've had plants which I kept for 30 years,
Mm-hmm.
and they were exactly the same as
The
I
original
found.
clone.
But most people don't keep pests away from their cannabis. So if you have a clone for 40 years,
It's likely to have had pests at
it's
some point.
likely to have had viruses picked up
Yeah.
from it. And different viruses, and the more there are, the more this has the effect of, can lower resistance, vigor, yield, and sometimes they don't even have visible problems,
Mhm.
but the vigor, the yield
Go down.
go down.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's why there's companies like this, the one in Canada, I forget, I'm trying to remember their name. It starts with an S, I can't remember the name. What they do is they take your clone and they grow it in vitro and they eliminate all the viruses.
Okay.
Then they return it back to you.
Oh,
Or
that's
thousands of copies if that's what you want. That's what they really
nice. So they
like.
kind of clean it up.
Yeah.
There could be a clone going for 20 years and has all these different viruses, and you give it to them and they clean it up for you.
And they'll give it back to you all cleaned up. and their tests show that it will yield more, it'll be more vigorous, it'll be healthier. And you could also, you don't have to do that for every crop. What you can also do is do it, have them maintain it for you, cleaned up, and then once a year, have them give you a few plants, which you grow into mother plants, and then you chop those up, and you got a head start.
Right. That's kind of a strange question here. How do you combat inbreeding depression? Obviously, you have to inbreed.
The easiest way is to use genetics from a completely unrelated variety. So, for example, an Afghan times a Colombian.
Yeah.
They're completely different. They're completely
So
unrelated.
you now cross from a completely different gene
And
pool.
when you cross those two ones, they will, for example, if you inbreed an Afghan self it so that you do it for several generations.
Yeah.
You'll end up with an Afghan which is really low vigor, really low resistance, yield is fucked up. If you do it more than 4 years, you'll even see it so that it won't even drop the yeast pollen. The
No.
pollen is sticky, and you have to get a Q-tip to be able to pollinate with it
Wow.
after about the
So
fourth.
it'd be effectively like crippled.
But if you do that to an Afghan line, you do that to a Colombian line, and then you cross the S4s of those two, bango, it restores the hybrid F1 vigor.
Super. And that's what we need is hybrid vigor, man. That's what it's all about.
Don't tell the secrets.
Light deprivation, I think they call it. That's
Yeah,
a technical term.
with darkening, yes.
Yeah.
That's what they call it.
Yeah, they're very much into the
I saw
light
it
deprivation in
first.
California these
I
days.
saw it first in, it was, what kind of, chrysanthemum growers. I went to a chrysanthemum greenhouse, and they had this darkening unit, and they showed me how it worked.
That's where I saw it because my grandfather was one of the top members in the Royal Horticultural Society and he used to grow chrysanthemums back in the 60s and 70s.
So I saw it here, it must have been like 85 or 86,
Yeah.
and a light went on my head, and I said, Jesus Christ, chrysanthemums are controlled by photoperiod, and all they're doing is they're altering the photoperiod and making them flower on command.
Yeah, you can have
So-
them all year.
So what I realized was that we could do that with cannabis, and the next year we had greenhouses with darkening
Yeah,
units.
with light deprivation.
And we never
Regimens.
looked back.
Yeah.
I mean,
It really
absolutely-
changed things. Yeah.
If you have really good clones, it's really, really easy to use darkening and produce wonderful cannabis.
Yeah. Would you have to have it completely dark in there? No pinholes or anything?
No, there could be little tiny pinholes, and it might slow it down a day or two.
Yeah,
You understand? But it absolutely still worked.
because some people
And you
say
can
that
even-
that leads to intersex traits in a variety if it's given.
If the variety has intersex traits
Already,
in
yeah.
the
It
genes,
can trigger it.
then it can trigger it, yes.
Yeah.
But no, it does not. If you have a plant that does not have intersex
You
genes,
can't do it.
genetically or by environmental causes, then
It's not turning into a ladyboy.
no. My hazes, for example, if I use really fucked up darkening photoperiods, it doesn't cause any intersection.
Right.
Because they don't have the genes that are required for intersex.
Hermaphroditism. Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure it's hermaphrodite, whatever, I call it intersex, but
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah, because we used to screen ours with our clones,
Right.
our female clones. We would fuck with the photo period. We'd put them in little tiny pots for a year or two. We'd give them too little fertilizer. We'd overwater them,
Stress
underwater.
them.
We'd stress them. We had a list of like 25 different stresses. And we did that for a year or two. And if we couldn't make it do it, those are the females that we wanted.
Right.
we wanted females that were truly, truly female.
Yeah. And there's no way you could turn them.
Yes, with STS. Because that's what STS is not an environmental influence. It completely alters the hormone production in the cannabis plant and makes it express male flowers.
Yeah.
But it's not because it's weak or fucked up or intersex or anything. It'll do it to any plant.
Yeah. Because it's being interfered with chemically
Yes.
or hormonally.
Yeah, just like you can also turn a male into a female by using ethanol.
Yeah.
And that works really well too. If you want to know what your male is contributing to a female F1 hybrid that you're making with it, and you don't know, there's two ways you can do it. You can either cross it to all of your females clones that you have, and then grow out the F1 and F2 seeds and see what happens.
Yeah.
Or you can take the male and treat it with ethanol and make it produce female flowers. And it expresses female flowers. And the flower construction is not exactly the same as it would be in a true female because it's like a masculine flower. It's female.
It's a bit butch.
Yeah, it's you know how males are a bit more stretchy in there.
Yes.
And they're not as chunky as the bitches.
That's the female.
Yeah, but it
Plant
tells you
architecture.
it tells you the potency. It tells you the terpene contents.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it's really really useful. I never knew why my Skunkman one was so sweet. I knew that the female that I was using was very sweet.
Mm-hmm.
But it turned out the male I was using was sweeter.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that for years until I published it in your magazine.
Sweet as in what exactly? Sweet as in
meaning
taste?
not skunky is what I really mean.
It didn't taste like cat piss. It
No,
tasted
it
more
didn't taste
fruity
like
and
No,
more sweeter. Was it saccharine sweetness or like
no, it wasn't
fructose?
saccharine sweet. No, it was just
fructose?
it was just yeah. I wish I had a bud here. But you smoked my skunk.
I know. It
But
was
that's-
so long ago.
But that is what it was. Because any buds that you smoked with me, that was my clone. And because I used it for seed production, I used it for cannabis production, I used it for everything. Because it was so fucking great. It was 1 out of 20,000.
Yeah. Well, I've known other seed breeders or seed makers in Amsterdam who've used your male skunk to make a whole seed company. So they take everything else, they cross it with that male skunk, and then it's got some consistency.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
so that makes them capable to be able to sell their seeds,
in the
telling
80s
people what
and
they'll turn
90s,
out like.
In the
Because otherwise
80s and
there's too many
90s,
phenols.
I would say skunk was the most hybridized plant out there with
Yeah.
other people's stuff because everybody knew
It was
had a good rep,
stabilized. Yeah.
and it usually made things better.
Yeah.
So a lot of people used it.
I remember back in the 80s or early 90s, going to a grow room with Mao from Nirvana seeds, and him telling me, "Yeah, this is pollinated with the male from Sam," you know, and nearly half of his varieties or more, they were all from your male. You know,
Yeah,
we
when I used to-
consistently use that male.
When I used to use pollinations, a lot of time I would just use my skunk male because it made it a lot easier to do really large pollinations of an entire greenhouse rather than having to do little tiny pollinations in a room or
Yeah.
whatever.
Brush it on a branch.
Yeah,
you know,
no.
just
Well, you know that, what do they call this for sand, for sandblasting?
Air pressure.
What are they called? It's a pressure gun. It compresses air and blows sand,
Yeah.
Well, I filled it up with a 1 pint jar with pollen. And I walked back to my greenhouse and pollinated 1,000 square meters It took me about 3 minutes.
Well, that's pretty
I
quick.
used way too much pollen.
Mhm. Well, rather use more than not enough.
No, because if you over pollinate a plant, the seeds are smaller and they take longer to mature.
Really?
Yeah. I like doing early pollinations to produce less seeds and let them finish longer, 10 weeks, 12 weeks if necessary. And then you get the ultimate seeds that easily last 20, 30 years.
Yeah, the hard shells. Yeah.
Dark, hard shells.
Yeah.
And no white down by the bud.
I got these seeds from La Réunion many years ago called Zamal,
Yeah.
and they were black.
Yep.
They were black seeds hardened in the sun, I think.
Zamal was pretty good stuff, except for it was Hermy, yeah?
I think it did have some, intersex traits, but not heavily, particularly.
Yeah. What you could have done is, because when I got South African, I got it from Jim Goodwin, a friend of mine in California. It was Ed Roosevelt's partner. Jim gave me South African, but he didn't realize that the seeds he gave me, he'd given to somebody else and they had reproduced them. And he had told them that they had intersex problems. But he gave them to me without remembering or knowing.
Tell you.
So I worked for four, I think maybe even 5 years on it. And I grew a bunch of them, eliminated all the ones that were the most intersexed, grew the progeny of that, and did it for 4 or 5 years in a row till I got rid of 99% of the intersex problems.
Wow.
And that's what I brought over here and I released over here. And it worked fine here. We didn't see intersex problems when we grew it here.
Yeah.
So you can eliminate intersex, but you really got to work hard at it. You got to be really ruthless, and you've got to grow enough plants that you can select ones that are the least or not intersect.
Yeah. A lot of plants, they might look like they're not intersex, and then if you let them flower just a little bit longer than maybe usual, they'll throw out a banana here and there, and you might have a seed in it.
Yeah. Or I even saw with skunk very occasionally. If you let it go and let it go and let it go past its prime, it would make one little banana at the top, but there was no pollen in it, and it never made any seeds.
No.
But that annoyed
the calyx.
It annoyed me that it was there, that it made that little banana, even though it did not make a problem.
No.
But I would have preferred if it wasn't there. At my house, you took pictures of the little tiny and really big seeds.
Yeah.
Those really tiny ones are more than 800 seeds to the gram.
Yeah.
The big ones are 12.
That's a huge difference in weight.
It's just a slight difference, yes. One of them's a sumo wrestler, and the other is not even a midget.
Those small seeds are like nearly the size of poppy seeds, weren't they?
They are the size of a large poppy seed. Yes.
Yeah.
And how big are the plants from the tiny seeds?
They're fairly normal plants. They're a little bit sparse and a little bit small, and it's not dope. Neither the big ones or the little tiny ones are dope. The big ones are for producing seeds that people crack and eat. And the tiny one is a completely wild variety. I don't think it was ever cultivated by man. And one of the reasons I think that is because if you grow the plant and it's seeded, because I grew them in Santa Cruz and pollinated with themselves, and you touch the plant just like this, the seeds go ping, 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 ping. They do what's called shatter, very, very easy. And that's not a trait that human beings will try to breed for.
No.
Because it makes it impossible to collect the seeds. What it's good for is survival in the wild for the plant, which is unassisted by man. But a lot of the opposite is like wide-leaf indica varieties. The seeds are really big, and to get the seeds out, you have to like beat it or break it up. I mean, they're not.
Calyx holds it really well.
Yeah, they're not going to pop out accidentally.
Yeah.
And that's because man has always reproduced them. and they're dependent on the hand of man.
Mm-hmm. Coated in glandular trichomes. Yeah.
Well,
Big fat seeds.
well, the seeds aren't coated, but the
But the calyx that
Yes.
surrounds the seed
the
kind
of the calyx, yes.
very sticky. Sam, what would you say is the best outdoor variety? Would be to grow in northern latitudes, say in the UK?
South African, if it's the early South African. Otherwise, there's a whole bunch of auto varieties now,
Yeah.
which people use. And I'm not an auto variety expert, so
No.
I'm not the person to talk to, but I've seen auto varieties that look resinous as hell,
Yeah.
and they will finish you.
I've actually been growing female autos. I'm about just a few every year the last 3 or 4
And
years.
any of them worth smoking?
Yeah.
There you go.
Not bad at all, because
years
years
ago,
ago I grew out ruderalis, and it was awful.
From Neville?
I don't know where I got it from.
Okay, because Rudolph's was introduced by
grew it
Neville.
out because I wanted to see if it would auto flower.
It was terrible.
Yeah.
It was really terrible.
I can't remember what was the name of that first variety that we got, the first auto flowering variety. I can't even remember.
There was also then after that came one from Canada from the joint doctor.
Yeah, the joint doctor.
Yeah, but I forget the name of the variety.
Oh, is that?
Iranian auto?
Huh?
Iranian auto?
No.
Maybe I forget what he called it.
Lowrider.
Lowrider.
That was it. The lowrider variety came out, and I grew that out.
But auto varieties, if it's got 2 sets of genes for auto,
Mm-hmm.
then it's stone cold auto. But you can also make auto varieties that are a hybrid between an auto and a regular, and it makes it earlier, but it doesn't make it stone cold auto.
Mm-hmm. It's got to wait for the right photo period before it flowers.
No,
you'll do it
it
before.
just takes longer.
Just takes
yes.
longer, yeah.
It's an early variety instead of a true auto variety.
Yeah. This is Cannabis ruderalis. I mean, it grows in far northern latitudes, so it has a very, very limited amount of sunshine.
Yeah, no.
So they have to finish fast.
If they don't finish fast, they don't survive on the planet.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Is that how they make F1 fast versions?
No.
they do some like that, but the problem is, of course, is that half of the genetics are coming from an auto variety that may not be dope. So, that's a bit.
Yeah.
But
These have worked. I mean, this year, what's it called? Acid Kush I'm growing this year. I've got 3 plants going. They're very vigorous looking again this year, very vigorous. They only grow, I've got them in a pot about this big and this deep, and they grow about this high, 26 to 30 inches generally.
they're age determinant, so just when they get a certain age, they flower.
They flower,
Yeah.
and so they stop growing so much, and they grow out, they bush out. It buds.
Well, if they stop flowering right now, then you can tell that they must be auto. Because foot appeared so long right now.
Yeah, it is, yeah. You have to be waiting until the end of August to wait till or early September before they flower normally.
Is your old skunk feral clone, is it still alive?
Yes, as far as I know. But like I say, I don't have clones. I don't,
No.
I'm not
Okay.
working with.
But other keep it still alive.
That's the myth and the rumor. But I find that people try really hard, but when it's an illegal trade, it's very, very hard to maintain things for 30 years.
Yeah, right.
It's really, really difficult. I mean, maybe if you had it backed up 3 or 4 different places, that might help. But whatever. I mean, it's not easy.
And there's always a question that pops always up, but it's always already also answered from you. But maybe you can give us an overview over the original haze, where it comes from, and when
What's
it got
it, the Hayes brothers?
Well, one of the Hayes brothers.
This is like legend, is it?
Yeah. One of the Hayes brothers bred it up in the mountains first, and then brought it down to Santa Cruz.
Did you know both of them?
I knew both of them. They were both neighbors. And I knew them well.
What was their first names?
I'm not going to say.
Oh, okay.
They've asked me. One of
Are
them's
they
dead.
still alive?
One of them's dead.
Oh,
But the end effect of it is it was Colombian, 3 varieties of Colombian, which they just grew together, and so they became a Colombian mishmash.
Because I saw this original Haze poster from
Yeah,
1976.
that was from the second brother, yes, who wasn't the brother of the brother, but he was. What High Times called the Hayes brothers because they never called themselves the Hayes brothers.
oh right. So it was an adopted name for.
Yeah, one of them made the original Hayes poster, and the other one was the one who actually came up with it all first.
So there was no tie in the haze. It was just Colombian.
No, I gave them some really, really good Thai seeds, and they grew them, but they both. One of them said that it wasn't good enough, he didn't want to use it, but I thought it was. But the other one, he made some lines with Hayes Thai, but they were gone within a year or two, and then it was the end of it.
And when was the first time you get in contact with original Haze, and was a high
It
like
was right after I came back from India, so it must have been 71, 72.
and it just blew you away that you was addicted?
Well, I had smoked homegrown before, but I never smoked homegrown that was better than any imported weed. And this one was better than anything imported, even better than the best Thai. The Thai was maybe the best, closest. But we had Thai weed that was just
It
incredible.
was in the 70s in California.
Yeah.
That was Howard, I think.
Well, he was one of the
One of
people.
them.
I mean, my brother-in-law also brought in 20 tons.
Really?
So, I
Oh
mean,
Lord. Yeah, that stuff
yeah, he
is
just got out of
killer.
prison after doing 30.
Such a beautiful
30
colour,
years.
many hues
And also
of
this
brown
old
and orange.
Thai is gone, like hybridized or
It's very hard because the problem is in Thailand in the, maybe it was in the 80s, the DEA made agreements with the government and they went into where the, up in the area where
Golden Triangle.
it wasn't the Golden Triangle, the best weed was actually being grown to the east of Nong Khai
Ah,
and Incheon
yeah.
area. And they just, I mean, they paid the Thai government, and the Thai government wanted the money, and they went in there and
Well,
they got
I think
helicopters, they got all kinds of government support.
there was loans that were dependent on that from the International Monetary Fund to the Thai government,
Yeah.
and they had to eradicate cannabis
Because
production.
the years before that, friends of mine were exporting from Thailand, and the military would bring it out in trucks and boats to their ship
Mm-hmm.
in the bay and load it for them. I mean, you know, they just want the money,
Yeah,
like everybody else. I mean,
yeah, it's a big industry. Cool. It's been great talking to you, Sam. And well, Sam, I am.
just remember that if anybody uses any of my advice, they owe me 50% of their crop, and my address is P.O. Box.
Okay, did everybody hear that? If anybody takes any of his advice, he's got 50%. He's your Colonel Tom Parker. You're Elvis Presley.
yeah. Thank you very much for your time, for all the information.
Anyway, let's wrap it up, guys. Yeah?
Okay.
Yeah.